So in the last couple of weeks, I guess it kind of was around this time of the NFL playoffs. I began to kind of slowly get sucked back into the world of sports, which when I was growing up, I really loved sports, and then I kind of was like, this is just too much time, but really like too much like emotional investment. I don't know if there are any sports fans here, but like it really is crazy to just like and to get so much like vicarious pleasure out of like just something that's totally separate, and also so much pain if your team loses. Maybe this isn't something that a lot of people can relate to, but maybe you can. Maybe there's something that you know that you care a lot about that maybe you shouldn't. I don't want to say I shouldn't necessarily, but I do reflect like, wow, I really want my team to win, and I really will be sad if they lose. And I think that's a fine thing. We all have desires and things that we want that we know aren't the biggest thing in the world. Maybe we want our sports team to win. Maybe we want something to happen in a TV show that we enjoy. There are many different like lowercase desires that we have, and then there are some that we might agree are bigger. Like I think of health and long life as something that I'm sure that all of us we want. That I'm sure that all of us have experienced some kind of like health issue or pain, maybe chronic pain. And it's actually a year and I think 2 weeks since my hip surgeries last year, and I'm very thankful to my mom for caring for me through that, and my dad as well. But since then, I still feel every so often like, I don't know, some scar tissue or something, and it's a pain that I do feel. My brother just had knee surgery. Like these health issues are something that like we know that we want, and sometimes we don't have. So yeah, there are like desire is a fascinating thing, because there are some things that we feel like we want that are maybe lowercase level, and there are some things that we really want and maybe even need, like health. Or something that we need even more than we would all agree that we really need, is we want and we need and we desire like a stronger connection with Yeshua and with the other people in our lives that maybe we have conflict with. I know that I seek God when I'm in a conflict with people. Like that's a place of deep desire, even more than health, is to be able to I don't know, like if there's a bad situation, that God will intervene. That's something that I pray about. So why do I talk about these three like tiers of desire? Things that we want, but we know we don't need. Things that we feel like we need, and things that we like really deeply want. Is that I want to talk to us today about desire in general, and how we bring our desires and our wants to God. And I'm going to tell you right now, I want to encourage you, whatever you want, even if it's a small thing, I encourage you, don't be afraid to bring it to God. I'm going to be reading from 1 Samuel chapter 1, and it's a great story that I'm sure that many of us have heard before. It's the story about the birth of Samuel and the prayer of Hannah that made it so that it happened. And I want to talk about three characters in this story. The first is Elkanah, who is Hannah's husband, and how he is an example of the way that we should consistently be praying and seeking God, like kind of in spite of the outcome of our prayers, just as an act of worship, just how we should relate to normal life, regardless of how we desire. Elkanah is a really good example of how to worship God in daily life, regardless of what's going on. But Hannah, she gives us a different perspective. She shows us how to seek God when we really, really want something. And she's a great example of that. And then finally, we have Samuel. And Samuel is a child, barely weaned in the first chapter of 1 Samuel. But he shows us kind of like what the point of our desires are actually. And that is to glorify God and to return it back to him. Okay, so now if everybody can, please turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 1. I will say the version that I'm reading is a little bit more, it's the Jewish publication that's like 100 years old, and it's going to have some kind of King James sounding words, if that's not the translation that you normally read. Normally, I don't really read it, but I noticed that in some of the commentaries that I was looking at, some of the words are just a little bit more helpful. Because the title of this sermon is Lending to God. And petition and vexation, just want to point out, vexation is deep annoyance, in case that word isn't something that you use a lot. Okay, so chapter 1. Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim, of the hill country of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went out from his city from year to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, who were there priests unto the Lord. And it came to pass upon a day when Elkanah sacrificed that he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all of her sons and daughters portions. And I just want to stop for a second. The way that the sacrificial system was for the people of Israel is that they would bring an animal to be sacrificed, the priest would get some of the meat, and then the rest of the people that were bringing would get some of the meat, and those were the portions. So even the sacrifices that they would bring were not something to be very solemn about, but they were something to enjoy. You were supposed to eat. You were supposed to eat like a delicious bowl. And it seems like when you read the Torah, a lot of their meat consumption is very closely connected to sacrifice. So this was something that was going to be special for them. So he gave unto Peninnah his wife and all her sons and daughters portions, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, or a double portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb. And her rival vexed her sore to make her fret. So her rival really bothered her about this, really made her feel bad that she had no children, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so Peninnah vexed her. Therefore she wept and would not eat. And Elkanah her husband said unto her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons? So Elkanah is a very interesting person in the scriptures because we don't get very much from him in the book of Samuel. But the rabbis kind of do a little bit of reading in between the lines about Elkanah's character. And I actually think that what they have to say is pretty interesting and seems correct to me, and I'll explain why later. In Midrash Shmuel 1:7, Shmuel is Hebrew for Samuel, several rabbis talk about Elkanah's unique righteousness. Rabbi Haggai, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, describes how he was a man who ascended, kind of like the Psalms of Ascent. He ascended to the place of the Lord with his household, its courtyard, his city, and all of Israel. And the Midrash also, and this is maybe where they're really reading between the lines, but they say that when it says from year to year, that's more than just consistency. That they said that he would go in different places. That's what it means by from year to year. To emphasize that he wasn't just going up to worship God by himself, but he was going in different places to make sure that all of Israel knew that he was going up. And while that's taking a lot from year to year, I do want to say this is in the time of the judges. Like we see in Judges 21:25 that all of Israel was doing whatever was right in their own eyes. But Elkanah was consistently going up to God. And his community would have seen it. They would have seen how he took care of his family. They would have seen that he was a righteous man. Rabbi Abba Bar Media, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak also, describes how he worships and sacrifices. But worship comes first. It doesn't say he sacrifices and worships. It says he worships and he sacrifices. And this is perhaps emphasizing the importance of personal devotion over ritual offerings. Kind of like another verse in 1 Samuel, to obey is better than sacrifice. Also made famous by Keith Green. But he has a personal devotion to God beyond just his rituals. Because rituals are really good when your heart is in them. And that's not to say that that rituals become bad when your heart is not in them, because we all have seasons where our heart is confused. So I don't want to make anyone feel bad if they don't feel like that kavanah each time we pray. That's like obedience is the most important thing. To obey is better than sacrifice, not to feel something in your heart. But he was somebody who was personally devoted. And I will say, though, he was not perfect. Rabbi Levi, in the name of Rabbi Chama, describes how he did have flaws, specifically the flaw of polygamy, which resulted in household strife. And I do want to take a side to say that just because polygamy happens in the Bible does not mean that the Bible approves of it. We see that in this situation, as much of a righteous man that he was, his choice to have multiple wives caused some strife, between his wives, which is very sad. You don't want your home to be broken up by that much fighting, and it's built into the system. So I do want to just emphasize, just because it happens in the Bible doesn't mean that God says it's okay. Okay, so that's Elkanah as a righteous person who consistently worships God and consistently seeks him. And now we see in verse 8 that he wants to worship God in the right way. And that plays into his confrontation of Hannah, because he confronts Hannah. It's very interesting. He says, "Why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons?" Now, that final line makes it sound like it's because of his own feelings, and maybe there's something in that. But it's more than this. Deuteronomy 16, 14 through 15 makes it a command. It says, "Be joyful at your festivals, you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, and the Levites, the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns." So even the people that are oppressed in this society, the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows, they're also supposed to try to rejoice in God. That's the point of these festivals, is to celebrate what God's done. So when Hannah is weeping, which is a sign of someone having died, but there's no one dead, or she's mourning, there is nothing necessarily to mourn. There is no tragedy that's happened, and she's not eating. The festival calls for the eating of offerings. So her being so deeply affected by her desires causing her to not fulfill the commandments. And this is very interesting, because we're going to see that Hannah is praised for her deep desire later on, or rewarded at least. Elkanah has a deep, deep love for Hannah. That's why he takes care of her so carefully. But he doesn't understand her desire, because according to the rabbis, her desire isn't just like something that she wants, but it's more like a need. It's a need for a deep spiritual fulfillment for children for her. Like having children was a calling that she knew somehow. And I want to point out, one, that this story shows that we can't, like Elkanah kind of tries to logic his way into her feeling better. And as much as it seems like his heart's in the right place, that he loves her, I think that we should take from this lesson that that's not always the best thing to do. Like sometimes, and Adat, who's another medieval commentator, he says that her grief was deeper than logic. And sometimes that is how our grief is. So when we encourage people, and when we maybe say like, "Hey, consider it this way," like, be careful, because notice how Hannah doesn't respond. Like, she maybe doesn't have an answer for him, but there's also like, he's trying to use logic when she's feeling something really deeply. So we should be careful with this. I actually think that this story is a really interesting kind of dichotomy, like a situation of two stories where they're both being righteous and their heads are kind of bumping into each other. Because we see like just in how we talk to people, when someone is sad and when someone is meditating on not having something that they want, we kind of can think of two things. One, that person is righteous by seeking God, but also that we kind of think, well, maybe you should count your blessings. And she was very blessed. Her family's clearly relatively wealthy. She has a husband who cares for her, but she wasn't counting her blessings. So this story is talking about like kind of like an interesting conflict between the righteousness of rejoicing even in the sorrow, like Elkanah does, but also the righteousness of pouring your heart out for God, or to God about something that you want. And I can't give you an answer if that's where you are right now. Like, should I just be content with my situation, or should I continue to seek God? Because I think every situation is different. Elkanah's a righteous man, Hannah's a righteous woman, and they're in conflict here. About a week ago, my grandpa passed away, and it was a real blessing to be with him in the hospital like the night before and be able to pray for him. And my dad and I were there, and we prayed for him for a while, like over an hour. And it was interesting. I feel like we kind of experienced some of the Elkanah and some of the Hannah in that moment, because we prayed for a miraculous healing, but we also prayed that my grandma would be comforted, and we prayed for his soul, assuming potentially a sad occurrence, which is what ended up happening. And I think that this story tells us that both of those things are good, that we should pray for the right attitude to sorrow, but we should also pray that God fixes things that may bring us sorrow. Okay, so that's that first kind of conflict, the idea of worshiping God even in spite of having a desire that is unmet. But now we're going to see a little bit about how Hannah responds. This is verse 9. Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon his seat by the doorpost of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt look upon the affliction of thy handmaid and remember me and not forget thy handmaid, and wilt that give thy handmaid a son, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall be no razor upon his head. And it came to pass, as she prayed long before the Lord, that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah, she spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunk? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered, said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thy handmaid for a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and my vexation have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thy servant find favor in thy sight. And so the woman went away, and her countenance was no more sad, and she ate. And then they rose up early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, and returned, and came to the house in Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. I want to point out all the ways that the Lord is the actor in this story. It's not quite like it is in Genesis, where the Lord is really like the only person that's making decisions for the most part. Like, we see Hannah do things, and Elkanah do things, and Eli do things. But each time that something big's happening, it's the Lord remembered her. And it says that twice. So her despair is so intense, it seems like drunkenness. And I think this is a good thing to remember, that like maybe someone might seem like they're behaving one way, but we should be circumspect. We shouldn't be like Eli and jump to conclusions. But I want to point out that her despair is just overwhelming. It's preventing her from doing these things. But just having a conversation with Eli where he blesses her, she goes back and she eats and she drinks. Maybe it was because she had supreme confidence at this point that she would have a child, but it doesn't necessarily say that. But she came back and her countenance was no more sad. Just her face changed. She decided to worship God the way that he commands in the Torah, even before the son was given. Another interesting thing about this passage is that Hannah is the first person in the scriptures to use the divine name, the Lord of hosts, Adonai Tzevaot. We never see that as something that someone says before 1 Samuel. And what does that mean? So what some of the rabbis think about this is that the Lord of hosts, it's emphasizing that he has many things that serve him, and he's in charge of many things. And if you think about it, God is so massive, so powerful, so beautiful, so full of joy that he is bigger, he's bigger and better than all of his hosts combined. So if I just say the Lord, that is massive. But if I say the Lord of hosts, what am I really adding to him? Like, from a certain sense, nothing, because he created the hosts, and he could uncreate them like that because of how powerful he is. But when we say the Lord of hosts, we recognize that God has emissaries, he has things and people that do his bidding, and we also recognize that God has so many different things. In Berachot 31b in the Talmud, it says that the Gemara suggests that when she says Lord of hosts, it is like a parable. It is similar to a flesh and blood king, a human king, who makes a feast for his servants, and a poor person comes and stands at the door and says, "Please give me one slice of bread." And they paid him no attention. They paid the poor person no attention. But he pushed and entered before the king, and he said to him, "My lord, the king, from this entire feast, Lord of hosts, that you've prepared, is it so difficult in your eyes to give me a single slice of bread?" So that's why it makes so much sense to say, for Hannah to say, Lord of hosts, as she's making this prayer. For God, it is small to be able to do something like this. Now, this is an incredible miracle. We see this story, and it's kind of in contrast to all of the men and women who have had desires for children that it hasn't happened. So we shouldn't assume that this happens willy-nilly. But that is how we should seek God, understanding that he is the Lord of hosts. He has so much to give. Everything is small compared to him. So we should be like Hannah here. We should seek God radically. We shouldn't just only have that mindset of Elkanah. We should weep sore when we want something that bad. We should let ourselves be vexed. That is what God rewards when we seek him strong, when we seek him with all our hearts. And what happens when this happens is God does intervene. Okay, so those are the first two things. Is one, be like Elkanah, worship God consistently, regardless of how you feel, but also be like Hannah and seek God with your emotions, and don't be afraid to act the fool in front of him, to say something crazy, because he understands. And now number 3 is what is the outcome of this, of Hannah and Elkanah's desires? It's Samuel, and it's the idea of lending to God. So worship God, give your desires to God, and then lend or give back to God. Verse 20, and it came to pass when the time was come about that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, because I have asked him of the Lord. And the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, until the child is weaned, when I will bring him up, that he may appear before the Lord and there abide forever. She understood the seriousness of this. And Elkanah her husband said to her, do what seemeth thee good, tarry until thou have weaned him, or until he no longer nurses. Only the Lord established his word. So the woman stayed and gave her son suck until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bulls, or a 3-year-old bull, and 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine, and brought him into the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. And when the bull was slain, the child was brought to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath granted me my petition which I have asked of him. Therefore I have also lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he is lent to the Lord. And Samuel worshiped the Lord there. Samuel is a gift from God that is promptly returned. Stephen Olson, a scholar that I read some of his commentary, said, prior to Samuel's birth, Hannah is making promises to give him to the Lord. And the word that is used is natan, which is like strictly give, which is like you say, hey, I'm going to meet you here, and then I'm going to give you this possession, and then it's going to be yours. But the word that she uses in verse 28 is not natan. She uses something different, which is Shaul or Shael, which I will remind you is the name for Saul, or Saul's name. And this change of the term, which is more like it's request or lend, it's something with a little bit less like permanence in how it's being used. She's using it, she's saying this because that gift that God has given her is something that like it's hers forever. She will never not be his mother just because she's not raising him. That was a gift that will always be there, that joy that she had, the ability to wean him, those memories, and just the fact that like she is now a mother, her divine vocation, her divine calling is fulfilled. That can never be taken away from her, even though she is being fully obedient to the vow that she gave. She is bringing her son, and she's not going to see him more than like once or twice a year here on out. And I think that idea of lending to the Lord tells us a lot about the way that God gives us gifts. God gives us something, but that thing, it's not just for us. It's also, it's to be dedicated. And I don't necessarily know what that means. That could mean a lot of different things for everything. But I think that it's a good way to think about the things that we have. Everything that we have is a gift, and everything that we have should in some ways be dedicated to the Lord. He is to be a Nazirite, so he is to be devoted. He will abstain from wine and strong drink. That's described in Numbers 6. I recommend that people read up on the Nazirites. It's very interesting. To reframe this idea of Samuel being dedicated is that he is kind of a counter Saul. He's the opposite of Saul. It's very interesting that he isn't named Saul. It would have made kind of more sense. But Saul is somebody who maybe lends to God but wants it back. We see in the rest of 1 Samuel that Saul starts out really on fire for God and then eventually does his own will. And he behaves like other people in the book of Judges, where he does what is right in his own eyes. But Samuel actually does implement God's will. And Rashi says that, like, kind of to express a little bit about why he was named this. So Rashi emphasizes this. He says he was a gift from God, but his name should have been Shaul. It's strange that it isn't. So why is his name this way? So Shemuel, it means his name is God. So it emphasizes that everything is from God. His name is God. Shemael is the one who was from God, and Samuel it was God who put him there. So there is a way where the name Samuel, it emphasizes that the gift is from God and that God is the great giver, because all things are from God. Okay, so this is Samuel. Samuel is somebody who is dedicated to God. And now I want to bring us back to our lives and our interaction with desire and our interaction with prayer. James 4 gives a little bit of an understanding of this. It says, so James 4, 1 through 4. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Now, before I dive into this verse, I do want to say we shouldn't think of this final verse as, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God, in the sense that we shouldn't love the people of the world. That is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible says, for God so loved the world, and we should also love the world. I think what it's saying here, if you look directly at the context above, is that we shouldn't let the world dictate our desires. And that is both positive and negative. Just because the world likes something doesn't mean that we shouldn't. The world is sometimes right, sometimes wrong. We should not let the world dictate our desires in order to be like it or in order to radically be opposed to it. We should only let Yeshua dictate our desires and let the scriptures dictate our desires. Thank you. Amen. But yes, in terms of the practicality of it, though, we don't always know. We don't always know where our desires are coming from, because we grow up in the world. In a lot of ways, we know the world before we know the teachings of Yeshua. Our desires are kind of like, it's all intertwined with the desires of the world. And I love what James says here. He says, you have because you do not ask, and you ask but you do not receive because your passions are pretty much passions of the world. I think that what we should take from this is, whether or not our desire is from the world, we should ask God. And if we don't get it, that doesn't mean that that passion is necessarily from the world, but it does mean that it wasn't God's will for us to have. We should take this verse with us and say, when I want something, I want to ask God for it. I don't want to, what does he say? I don't want to go and fight with my neighbor over it. I don't want to covet and try to obtain it. I want to go to God for it. And maybe he will guide me in a way to receive it. Now, it's possible for a believer to wrongfully obtain something. But I want to emphasize the way that we engage with God in prayer. We should not be afraid to ask God anything. If it is from a worldly passion, the prayer room, the place where we pray, is where God can heal us of that, can cleanse us from that. And that's why the Lord's Prayer is the way that it is. Matthew 6:5 says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep babbling like the pagans, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." It's such a good practice to memorize that, because it gives context to all of these complications about prayer. We should go to God with what we need, what we want. Like, we should go to him for our daily bread. But we should also, we should hope, we should pray. Our main prayer should be that his will is done and that his kingdom comes. So I want to encourage you, and I want to encourage myself as we make our desires known to God, that we be willing to let him change our desires. That we be willing to let him change our will and make us more in line with his kingdom. So I want to encourage you in a guilt-free place. Everything that you desire, ask God for it. And if it's something that you shouldn't be desiring because it's your passions mixed up, pray for his will to be done. Be like Yeshua. Yeshua prayed, "Not my will, but your will. Take this cup away from me, but not my will, but your will." Be like Yeshua. Pray to God for things that you want, you desire, but not your will, his will. The book of Judges again says that in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. So Hannah's need and Hannah's pushing for this is, it really is it's a fulcrum by which God's intervention in the world happens. Because of Samuel, we get David as a king. Because David as a king, we get Yeshua as our Messianic eternal king. Praise Yeshua, praise Jesus. Our desires are ultimately to give us strength to bring down the kingdom, to make it so that God's will happens on earth. And sometimes our desires are of the world, and may the Lord change that here or in the hereafter. So just to conclude, death and tragedy happens. Suffering, chronic health issues happen. And we should pray like Hannah and worship like Elkanah and be willing to give all our desires to the Lord like Samuel. Thank you. Praise God.